Hello, and welcome to Future Shapers Podcast, brought to you by the Spaceship Academy. My name is Tod Gimbel. I'm your host. I'm one of the co-founders of the Spaceship Academy. We hope that you listen to our podcast on our website or wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Google, here and there. Like us, subscribe to us. We hope that we add some value to your day. We're going to talk about interesting issues, as we already have in the sustainability space, and what's going on with some really interesting people. And today, we are super fortunate to have one of my co-founders of the Spaceship, Valerian Favel, with us. And Val predates me, obviously. He will tell you a little bit about his history, but it's because of Val and a couple others that I became involved in the Spaceship and really decided to make this something that I'm devoting a lot of effort to, and it's working out really well. Predates me, obviously. He will tell you a little bit about his history, but it's because of Val and a couple others that I became involved in the Spaceship and really decided to make this something that I'm devoting a lot of effort to, and it's working out really well so far. So Val, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks for having me.
And it's great to have you. And tell us, I'm sitting here in Los Angeles. We have a very international group of co-founders for the Spaceship Academy. Tell us a little bit about where you are and a little bit about your journey as to how you got to the point where you helped to found the Spaceship.
All right. Yeah. So I'm calling in from the Pays Basque in France, a city called Biarritz. And they call it the California of France because there is surfing and there's the ocean. And it's a really nice place to live.
I love it.
Hi, Californians. And how I got there. All right. So actually, I've always been, after my studies, in some kind of what I would call mission-driven or purpose-driven business. The first thing I did after my studies was go to Southeast Asia, in Cambodia, actually, to set up an impact fund. The word impact didn't exist back then, so we were calling it VC, Venture Capital for Development. And we were pioneers in supporting early-stage ventures that were built by the first generation of social entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia. We started with Cambodia. The fund became reasonably large for an impact fund. We became regional. We were investing in stuff like microfinance, housing development for people getting their first houses, water and sanitation in rural areas, basic needs. So how do we provide people with services or products that serve their basic needs in a context of creating a business, not an NGO? And so we were at this frontier between the market and not a market. We were creating markets for low-income populations there in Pakistan, in India, in Cambodia, and in Myanmar.
Wow. So what year was this that you were?
I was 2009 to 2020.
So at the beginning, you're right. There wasn't much of this going on, and it didn't really even technically have a name yet. It was either NGOs or commercial businesses. You were kind of in the middle somewhere. How did you end up in Southeast Asia in the first place?
Well, just meeting the right people and a little bit of luck. But basically, after my studies, I studied finance. I was reasonably good in school, and most of my colleagues in the university went to London in investment banking, and somehow, because I had traveled to India a bit and lived in India a bit earlier, I ended up accepting internship in Uganda. So I was sent by a Ugandan foundation, by an Italian foundation to Uganda to restructure a local hospital that was funded by the foundation. And so through that experience, I learned that whatever I had, learned in school can actually be applied to not necessarily make a lot of money, but really helping people. And I was really doing, it's restructuring, management, finance, accounting, all of that, I was doing it just for a different purpose, a different type of organization, and that was eye-opening for me. And when I finished that experience, the foundation that took me there introduced me to an Italian lady who was going to Cambodia to set up this impact fund, and she convinced me to jump on board, and here I was in Cambodia.
Wow. Did you live in Cambodia for a little while?
Oh yeah, for 4 years until we opened an office in India, and then I moved to India. And eventually, when the fund got bigger and we got regional, we all went to Singapore, for better or worse. It was more comfortable, but a bit less adventurous.
Interesting. Well, I just know, having lived in Southeast Asia myself for over a decade, I spent a lot of time in Cambodia, and it's a great place, and it's very fascinating compared to places like India and others. It was even probably more underdeveloped than some of the developing countries. It was on the lower end of the scale, but I don't know if you've been there recently, but now it's like you go to Phnom Penh and it's like a big city with giant buildings and commerce and all the stuff that probably wasn't there even 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I like to remember Phnom Penh the way it was in 2009.
They didn't have like the casinos and all that stuff yet.
Yeah, the
Well,
casino was there, but yeah, it's
was it?
back then you would reach the other side of the city in 20 minutes in the tuk-tuk, and back in the last time I went was probably 2022, and yeah, it took 1 hour and a half in heavy traffic.
It's definitely become a busy place, but a beautiful place, and also a place where, impact and sustainability is a big deal, because I've mentioned this before, that in countries like Cambodia, where people are just struggling kind of to make it to a certain level of living, they don't have the kind of mindset of, conserving and recycling and stuff. I mean, you drive in some of the rural areas and it's like a trash bin there, because people just throw stuff out. And there's a lot of work to be done in the sustainability space in places like Cambodia.
We can talk about this if you want. I have a pretty different view of this now. To be honest, I think, rich countries overconsume, overproduce, and that creates a huge amount of waste and draw off the resources, whereas Cambodians actually don't overconsume. And yeah, they just litter around a little bit, and that's a very visible type of pollution when you are on holidays, but really the problem of polluting our country, our planet, is not.
First world problem. Yeah. So okay. So you did. We got a whole episode on that. So you did Cambodia, India. I know you kind of ended up in Singapore. How did the rest of your journey get you there?
Well, the fund grew. We went from 10 million to 40 to 100 million when I left, and we became a regional fund, basically from Cambodia to India. Then we had portfolio investments in Myanmar and in Pakistan. We were talking to bigger investors, like country type of investors, DFIs, they're called, development finance institutions. And when you're at this size, for better or worse, people expect you to set up shop in a more trustworthy legal system, and Singapore is an obvious place to set up a fund in Southeast Asia. So we set up the fund, but we had to bring substance behind it. So most of the team moved to, most of the partners moved to Singapore. And
then
I didn't like it at first, but I liked it. It's a nice place to live in. Yeah.
Well, having been there 13 years myself, there are lots of aspects of it that I love, and there are other things that I don't love as much. But if you're going to move to Asia and you're from a developed country, it's a nice place to kind of get your bearings and then venture out to all those other places that you've lived in from a place like Singapore.
Yeah.
So tell me, so you did that, you moved to Singapore, you built this fund up. How did you pivot to what you're doing now?
So, well, the story is, I became a little bored doing investment work. We were initially a small fund supporting entrepreneurs. We were doing small investments. We had time for them, to a bigger investment house. And I didn't love the job as much. So I wasn't the right person to continue at this scale. And also, I ended up in investing, like VT investing, way too early in my career. That's the only thing I had done pretty much. And that's not so normal. So I was on board of startups where I didn't know anything about anything on entrepreneurship. And it was, I had holes in my experience, and I knew if I was going to stay an investor, I wasn't going to become a better one if I didn't go and experience other stuff. So entrepreneurship it was time for me to build something. And at this time I discovered, our fund was very focused on social issues, but I became quite aware of environmental issues around 2015, way too late, but still it became really important. I needed to do something about this to feel like my work was doing something around nature. And it took me a few years to figure it out because I left the fund in 2020. But I really wanted to work on environmental issues. Eventually, I left the fund, set up what's called a startup studio. And it's in between an entrepreneurial, it's in between building companies and managing a fund or a tiny VC. The concept is you're a collective of entrepreneurs and you build several startups with many people, basically. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is, okay, I'm good at a few things. It's more efficient and rational for me to do what I'm good at across several startups that I build than just try and code one day and do marketing the other day, and what typical entrepreneurs do when they set up their business. So I like the idea of entrepreneurship, a collective entrepreneurship. Startup studios are still a very, very nascent type of an entrepreneurship animal anywhere. But and all this took me back to Europe, where, as I said, the environmental issues are, the root cause of what's happening to our environment are in rich countries. The whole consumption models and non-circular, very linear type of consumption, production, conception, etc. So that includes Singapore. But very naturally, I realized that building solutions meant build solutions not in India or Cambodia, but more in France, in the US, or in Singapore. So that's the story. And among the startups I'm proud of being part of, the Spaceship is one. Definitely education is a huge issue, a huge potential to transition mindsets into understanding the limits of our planet, understanding what our consumption model, what toll our consumption model takes on the planet, understanding, what the toll it takes also on our mental health as well, this whole consumption loops and advertising and marketing, etc. So it's a very important startup for me.
So tell me, I know I've only been with you for a couple of years now, but there was a history prior to that. Give me a little of the kind of, how did the Spaceship come to be? Who were the founders? Kind of, I know at the beginning there was one focus, and we've kind of pivoted the focus a little bit. Maybe just give us a little bit of context about that, because I think people who hopefully want to engage with us would benefit from kind of understanding the origin stories.
Yeah, it's a interesting story, and it's amazing how many times the Spaceship has pivoted. In a way, it's incredible that it's, we're still alive. But originally, the Spaceship was designed as an entrepreneur program, a social entrepreneur program. So we were building startups in Jumanji that's limited to a handful. We wanted to bring all this knowledge and best practices to as many social entrepreneurs in the world as we could. And so we built this entire online training program that takes you from the root problem, understanding it, designing a solution, building your business, scaling it. We built this with an amazing entrepreneur called Laura Francois.
who, by the way,
who
is now one of our Spaceship Fellows. So she's back. He was with you, left the fold for a little while, is doing some great
yeah,
stuff, and now she's back in the fold. But we can talk more about that later. But go ahead.
yeah, right. She's great. And so, but yeah, basically, it was a failure from a business perspective. There was no, it was really hard to monetize. As much as the social mission was strong and the solution itself was useful for entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs don't really have money. They find other ways to get information, to get help, etc. And so, just didn't have a market fit. And at some point, we came to the choice to just shut down the business or continue it maybe as an NGO or a foundation. But we didn't go that route. We're not equipped to build or run a foundation or an NGO. And I think we're entrepreneurs at heart. So we we also like to build things that people pay for, because that's a great way to improve and validate the value you're bringing to people, etc. So we first pivoted to, all right, entrepreneurs are going to figure it out. But the businesses that are not figuring it out are the large companies. They are getting stuck in their linear extractive model. There are within them forces that want to change, want to push them in a more sustainable journey. Not many, but a few. There are customers adding pressure to this, governments adding pressure to this, and we have at the Spaceship a very fresh, updated, innovative view of, okay, what it is to run a business that takes into account the limits of the planet and the social equality. And we started training corporates. We started training corporate teams on everything we had learned and knew on sustainability, but also on the entrepreneurial approach to reinventing your business, testing things out that are more sustainable, and bringing in concepts like circular economy with design thinking, with product market fit design, so that corporate teams learn things, start understanding and acknowledging the realities of the planetary limits, but also take an entrepreneurial approach to changing things from within.
No, I was going to say that is great, because basically you pivoted from trying to sell something to people who didn't have the money to pay for it, although they figured it out, to going to groups like big companies where I come from, that they may have the money, they may have the desire, but they don't really know how to do this and what to do, how to make it work. But they potentially have the scale that if you inject, if you give them knowledge, if you give them information, if you give them some guidance, they can act a little more entrepreneurial and steer their giant battleships more like a smaller motorboat to kind of hit some solutions. And I think that's kind of where I came on board, to kind of, when you made that pivot. And so far so good, right? I mean, there's certainly a market, right? Big companies are doing things, but they're kind of pulled by what the governments are doing. They're pushed by what some of their employees are asking for, and more younger employees are asking for companies to have more purpose-driven than just pure profit-driven. So it might be the right time and place to do that. Is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah. I would say, companies are not doing nearly enough.
Of course.
There's a lot of reasons for this, but we believe at the Spaceship, I believe personally, that the lack of understanding of the problem and of the potential solutions is huge. It's what impedes them from taking action in a rational, visionary way. And that's why, we're doing everything we can to help them with education figure out for themselves the next step in their path to sustainability. But it's the beginning. It's still small budgets in corporates. It's still a few CSOs, chief sustainability officers, and a few employees in the companies that are really sweating to move that. But it's really happening. I mean, it's in March and it's not going back. So we can only accelerate that movement.
Now that's No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say between when we decided to take this path. You joined, and today there's one thing that came up in the world with. I'm definitely not a technologist. I don't think technology will save us all or anything. I think we just have to be a bit more sober on all things, a bit more simple. But really, generative AI that really exploded, and its possibilities are now very clear to me, to us at the Spaceship, and frankly to a lot of people in the world. And when you operate an education company and you understand the possibilities for the educative possibilities of and the potential scale of what AI can bring in terms of education. I mean, for us, it was an obvious next pivot to take so that we can continue our mission to train people, to train corporates, but at an even bigger scale, reaching more people with less resources at cheaper cost. It's just, a no-brainer. And that's when we brought in our CTO, Shruti, to enable us to realize that vision.
And Shruti's going to be our next guest on the podcast. And she, for guys like you and I who kind of get what's going on but don't understand the technicalities of, we're going to dive into a little bit of the technicalities. But from your point of view, as we add AI to the spaceship, how does that differ from, say, just using ChatGPT or some of the things that are out there? What do you see as the difference maker for what we're going to try to do with it, as opposed to what's already there?
I think ChatGPT and other models are amazing and powerful. What we realized is, they're unbiased, they're neutral. They're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're trained by what's out there. They don't have a purpose. And what we realized is the next step of this technology, not to be a dumb representation of what's out there, but an intentional, trained artificial intelligence matched with human intelligence, and constantly up to date with the state of the art of, in our case, everything around sustainability, equality, ESG for businesses. And so the ability, Spaceship's technology's ability to enhance large language models with human knowledge is one key element of, making sure that we're not training people with a complete crap or a black box.
Yeah.
That's very important. That's, people who believe in technology will say, that's fine, let technology do its thing. But in reality, for people who manage a company, have people to train, I mean, they need a safer environment if they're going to train their people on circular economy or equality or planetary limits or carbon accounting, etc. So you need to give them that comfort that there's some kind of driver on board. And so that's where we decided to plug human and artificial intelligence, and that's where our fellows, so world-class experts, come in and basically enhance, make the AI smarter and safer.
And it's kind of like not guardrails, but kind of like guardrails, because if you go to like just general like ChatGPT, you don't know for sure whether everything you're getting has been validated, whether it's true, whether it's partially true, whether it's, you could ask for something and it just, whatever's out there, it pulls together, but it doesn't have like a veracity monitor on it. Whereas if we put real people who are experts in a subject as kind of part of the guardrails and part of the training of the intelligence, you're going to get a much better output, much more reliable. And to your point, corporates will be able to rely on it more than just something where it's just going out into the dark and grabbing everything off of the web.
Yeah. So that's one. And the second one is, I mean, these AIs are evolving at an incredible pace, but right now, well, first of all, not many people know how to use them. They're not that user-friendly for most people actually. Right now, we're still early adopters figuring things out. So it's not yet digestible for everyone. And also, these tools are not designed to train or to teach. They're designed to mostly give you an answer or a set of answers. But they're not designed to take
It's
you.
not a journey. It's just
It's not a
like,
journey.
hey,
Yeah.
who led the Hungarian Revolution? It can tell you that, but it doesn't give you the context and stuff like that.
Exactly. The natural world, the realities of the physical and social realities of the planet is, one of the most complex things on Earth. They need conversations. They need discussions. They need understanding. They need proof. Everyone is we're all on a journey to understand what living sustainably means. So you can't just ask that to ChatGPT. You need a tool that is designed to help you learn, not
Great.
give you the fish, but help you catch the fish, basically. And that's what we do in the spaceship.
That's great. And we're going to talk more to Shruti about it. But the good news is this isn't just pie in the sky concept. We're actually working on proof of concept that this works, and we'll have something very shortly that can show that this is the next step in where AI can go potentially.
Yeah, definitely. That's exciting.
So that's great. And we'll hear more about that. So thank you for teeing that all up. And that's kind of part of the bundle of really interesting stuff that the spaceship is doing and up to and evolving towards. But let's get back more towards, you are truly a mission-driven guy, a purpose-driven guy, as evidenced by everything you've just told us in your whole history. What do you think would be one or two of the biggest things that big companies could focus on better than they're doing now to kind of really move the needle on making this planet a place that we can inhabit for more than just another generation or so?
But yeah, for me, it's quite clear. I mean, right now, my thinking on this is quite clear and evolved, and maybe it will change. But I strongly believe that by now, corporates should be working on their strategic path, their sustainable business model. So they need to understand, they don't have to change it now. They're not going to change it now. It doesn't make sense, because right now it would just mean that they make less money. But to be future-proof, if they really want to be around in 20, 30, 50 years, then they need to start visualizing, okay, what are the path for my business to still serve its purpose in society, have a way to sustain with healthy profits, etc., but also stop basically banking on the planet. And so this will take time for leaders to understand the strategic path, see what others are doing, absorb what science is telling us slowly. But really, there are solutions out there. There are models out there that leaders need to start, or leaders in every vertical in the company, leaders in procurement, leaders in HR, leaders in accounting, need to start understanding, okay, what does my job mean in a context where I can't just take resources out like this
Indefinitely,
indefinitely,
without
exactly. And that includes service companies that don't necessarily rely on mining directly. They do for all the IT infrastructure, but also they contribute to spreading more consumption, etc. So they've got to be careful. We know banks, for weird reasons, are responsible for the most pollution in the world. They're just banks. They just handle money,
Right,
so all these
right.
businesses need to start visualizing their strategic path very seriously. And only when they will have visualized them, we can be feeling good about, okay, there's actually a path for them to move. So education will help them do that.
No, I think that's great. And I think, to your point, you earlier talked about some of it is like a pull from governments that are putting, regulations and laws in place, and others a push from employees and younger people who say, hey, I don't want to work for you unless you're doing these things. But one of the things I notice that didn't exist even 5 or 8 years ago is companies are now focused more on their total supply chain than they were before as far as sustainability. So you mentioned like banks, well, I'm a bank. What do we do? Well, everything you touch, every service that's provided to you, all of your offices, all of your, you have a huge footprint beyond just someone, giving you their money to hold on to. And that's true of all these businesses. And I think as they think of themselves as a piece of a bigger infrastructure, it makes them open their minds to having, oh my gosh, yeah, I manufacture this product, but the people who supply me are, harvesting something from the rainforest, and we need to know more about that. So things like that they're much more well known than they were even less than a decade ago. So tell me, what are you reading, watching? What's on your like nightstand? If you could recommend something to people to like, upskill themselves other than hiring the spaceship, what would be your recommendations right now?
I would recommend, well, there's one book. So I'm an economist by training, and the more I learn about planetary limits, sustainability, the more I realize I've been learning real, like, total crap in economics class. It's just completely wrong now, and it's starting to be proven. But, again, education lasts decades, so you can't erase what's been taught for so many years.
Yeah, unlearning.
Exactly. But one of the most interesting economics book that I've read recently is called Slow Down or Perish by this French economist called Timothée Parich, that explains why the single focus on GDP growth, pure GDP economic growth for countries is taking us in the wall, and how we just need to change the operating system on this. We need to think about other indicators. And it's not degrowth for degrowth. I know everyone hates or is worried about this. It's not about degrowth. It's not about decreasing our quality of life or anything like this. It's about acknowledging that growth and prosperity is not about just this GDP growth, and monetizing, financializing everything is not a good idea. And there's so many good examples in this book that explain you why, and open your eyes on what value are non-monetized things bringing to the community when you just help your neighbor share something without renting it to your neighbor, spend some time unpaid doing volunteering work, etc. That makes you happy, by the way, and bring a lot more to the community than when you go to work in the morning and go work for a bank that finances the extraction of oil, basically. I think it's a very refreshing take on the economy.
That sounds good. Well, we will definitely put the name and stuff into the notes for this. Is it, by the way, is it in French or English, or is it available in more?
It's good enough and vetted enough that it's translated now.
So good. So I could probably read it, even in spite of my 5th grade French knowledge.
There are good French economists. We have Nobel Prizes, etc. There's a decent school.
I have no qualms with that, and I totally agree. Look, this has been really great. It's good to talk to you. Tell me, before we wrap up, tell me something that makes you optimistic about the future.
It's sometimes a bit hard to be optimistic. No, I find optimism for me in action. And we see a lot of people. We talk about this thing about like just get out, do something that you feel is good for the planet, not just for you. Just action feels good. And when I think we've seen with COVID, when everyone gets in motion, we can go super fast, tackling a super, super complex problem. So that makes me optimistic that when shit hits the fan, and it slowly is happening, we'll be able to react faster than what we're doing now. So hopefully we don't need to be the frog that is being boiled in the water and will die eventually. I think we can still jump. So that makes me optimistic.
Awesome. Well, look, it's been great having you with us. For those of you who are listening, this is the Future Shapers podcast brought to you by the Spaceship Academy. Our guest has been Valerian Favel, live from Biarritz, France. I'm Tod Gimbel, your host from Los Angeles. You can listen to this podcast and our previous episodes and our future episodes on our website, on YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So please like us, follow us, send us any suggestions or comments you have. And Val, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon for you and this morning for me.
Thank you, Tod.